we can talk about what I think would make a good hard surface portfolio. Obviously, this is going to be just my opinion. Like everyone has their own thoughts on this sort of stuff. But yeah, these are pretty much just mine on what I think makes a good hard surface portfolio. So firstly, everyone always asks about like the number of portfolio pieces. So I actually don't think you need many portfolio pieces to get a job. I think like I've seen plenty of people with like one portfolio piece, like one very good portfolio piece, get a job easily. For me, I reckon honestly, two is probably enough, honestly, to get a job. But we'll talk about it more here. So what I think the most important things is I think you should have one real world piece in your portfolio. So the main reason why I think you should have a real world piece in your portfolio is one thing is you get to learn from the real world, and it also proves to people that you can copy something one to one. So I think they're the two main big things for us, because you need to prove that you can, copy the task you're given and you're not just making stuff up, right? So that's why I think real world is definitely one of the main ones for sure. You see a bike? All right, yeah, I think people gotta stop making bikes. I think I've put too many bikes out there. But also one of the main benefits of like building something from the real world is you can physically go to a museum and you can see this thing yourself in person. You can touch, well, maybe not touch it, but you can see the thing you're trying to build and take your own reference photos. You can line up your own reference photos much easier because you have the focal length, all that sort of stuff. So that's why I think doing something from the real world is the most important. And I would do something from the real world first because, you're getting to learn how the real world functions. So what from the real world should you make? I personally think, so there's two different ways I think. You can either have something that's quite elegant and clean, like a car or a motorbike, or you can go with something that has more wear and tear, like an older generation fighter plane, or, like a worn out tractor or something like that. What I think is good is I think in your portfolio, it's good to have one thing that's clean and one thing that's damaged. So I would either pick one thing from here or one thing from down here. But I think like, for example, I reckon people should stop doing motorbikes because I've said too many people should do motorbikes. But why I always use the motorbike as like a good example of something to model is because it has like a good variety of modeling forms. So you've got, the nice elegant body forms. You've got the complex mechanical parts. Then you have to deal with like the tire tread. So something like this is a good show of skill. When it comes to doing something like a car, I personally don't think a car is good enough unless you're doing the interior and maybe the engine as well. So if you have like, for example, you have like the hood up and showing the engine, I think that's a much stronger portfolio piece than just having the car exterior. I don't think the car exterior is good enough, but the car exterior shows, nice, elegant modeling. And then you have the complexity of the engine. Something like that, I think, will work. You see a bike, we're on the right track? Yeah. I mean, the bike is just a simple example of, because it has such a variety of forms, right? Where you can still do the same thing with the car. You have your elegant forms of the car, and then you have the complexity of like the interior and the engine, right? What I think is cool is maybe doing a car that's not so common. Like everyone, sports, current gen sports cars are, everywhere, right? But doing like more of like an old racing vehicle like this. Something like this has a lot of character, right? And it has a lot of interesting complex forms on it. The other thing I think which is cool from the real world is if you do like like older generation aircraft, right? You have the nice elegant forms of the body, but you also have to deal with wear and tear, especially like the older generation fighters, right? But then you also have, the complex mechanisms of the rotor. You have the interesting, like intricate details of the cockpit, stuff like that. So these things can actually be super cool to make. But yeah, so this is why I think, build something from the real world, because it proves you can match something one to one. And while you're building this stuff, right? Like say, for example, you're building this helicopter, you have to think about how these things move. Like how will the gun rotate without crashing into everything like this? Where will the landing gear go when it raises? how does the rotor actually function? Like all this sort of stuff. Like as you're building it, you get to learn about how the real world works. And if I was starting from scratch, this is why I would do the real world first and not do a concept. Do real world first for sure. Speaking as someone with no experience with car interiors, what makes the car interior hard? It's not necessarily that the car interior is hard. It's just different forms than the exterior. Like, because you have to deal with obviously the different materials of the interior. It's not all just the same as the exterior, right? And it's also more the fact of like, just the car exterior isn't that complex. What makes it a complete asset is if, say, for example, you have the doors open and you can see into the interior. So this is much more impressive than just seeing a car exterior by itself. And then it gets even more impressive if the hood is up and you have the engine exposed, something like this, right? But yeah, so first thing I do, definitely real world for sure. Okay, so that's the first piece. The second piece, I would do something from concept. So the main thing with concept is it shows you have creative problem solving, which isn't involved here. So being able to take something like this and turn this into a film quality asset is a pretty good skill to have, because it's obviously what we need to do, right? So this already is film quality. We know what it is. It fits in the real world. But something like this doesn't look like a real object at the moment. So there's a skill in taking something simple like this and making this look like a real functional thing that would exist in the real world. So if you can prove that, that's also a great skill to have. Also with like this sort of stuff, it shows a lot of creative problem solving, because you don't know what the back looks like. You have no idea how the tires are actually connected. So if you're able to problem solve this and show that you can do it, that's also another big thumbs up. Yeah, so for me, I think you only really need two things. The real world, one thing from the real world and one thing from concept. But you'll notice, for example, I've broken it up into sections where you have like more clean, elegant, and then you have more worn out here. So if I was someone, I would pick something from one clean section and then one worn out section and try and diversify it. So say, for example, you make a sports car here with nice interior, super clean, all good. I wouldn't come down here and then do a damaged car as well. I think it's too similar. What I would do, for example, is I would maybe pick the car, build the nice interior, do the engine, and then maybe pick the worn out robot, because you kind of want to show that you have you can deal with elegant forms, but you can also deal with worn out, damaged forms. Same thing over here, for example. Yeah, you can maybe pick this cool, elegant vehicle here, and then maybe pick a damaged plane, or you could even go all the way of doing like actually a crashed plane. Because if you can show you can do like modeling, like damage, that's also a big thumbs up. So I would pick one from this group or this group, and then pick the opposite of the other side, for example. Because there's no point of building like a real world motorbike and then making a sci-fi motorbike. It's all just the same stuff. This topic though, this is where people have split opinions. So a lot of people think you shouldn't build something from existing IPs. My thoughts on this are, I probably wouldn't either, but it's not the end of the world if you do. So I think these two is the way to go. Oh God, these two is the way to go. But if you do something from okay, so I'll bring up the main issues. So the main thing that people have concern with, there's a small chance, like very, very small chance that, say, for example, you make the Harvester as a personal project, that I will look at it. So there's that, which people bring up. But if we're going to be realistic, the chance of the actual artist who made the real X-Wing looking at your X-Wing is going to be pretty low. But there's still a chance. And I don't know, for that, some people think it's not a good idea. I'm pretty okay with it. The main thing is, like, at the end of the day, if you do it good, who cares? Like, at the end of the day, like, people kind of overthink what portfolio piece they should do. But at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters is it good or not? Like, it doesn't really matter your portfolio piece choice if it's really good or not. But yeah, I think also another issue is, say, for example, if everyone does fan art of the X-Wing, you kind of just become another person that's done an X-Wing, right? That's also another issue. You kind of just become another one of the thousands of people that have made Chappie. But if you made a good Chappie model, it doesn't mean you're not going to get a job. It means it might just be harder to stand out. So for me personally, the way around this, like building something you're a fan of, for me is anime. So what building something from anime does is it essentially lets you do something from an existing IP, but it has the same problem solving as a concept. So if you take something that isn't well developed and you problem solve it and make this a film quality asset, this essentially is a way of doing something from an existing IP that you enjoy, but you also get to prove the concept side that you're able to problem solve, and you can take something that isn't realistic and make it like a realistic vehicle, for example. So this is where I think anime is a good way of doing this. But that's just me. I like anime. I think anime is cool. It's quite fun and challenging to take something that is very like simple and take it to film quality. But yeah, I think like ultimately at the end of the day, like people kind of try and overthink the portfolio, as in like if they pick the right choice, then they're guaranteed a job. Like at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It's just about proving your skills, right? And if the work is good or not. Like say for example, if you picked, I don't know, you pick the this car here, you've picked a good portfolio choice, but if the work doesn't look good, it doesn't matter. You're not going to get a job, right? Just like say for example, you picked Chappie, but you make an amazing Chappie model. It still doesn't mean you won't get a job just because it's something that already exists. The only kind of another big issue with doing like the existing IP thing is everything is already resolved for you. So the benefits of the real world is you get to learn from the real world how it works. The benefit of concept is that you get to learn how to problem solve. Doing something from the existing IP, you get neither of these benefits because you're not learning how the real world functions because this thing doesn't exist. While at the same time, you're not doing any of the concept development because it's already done for you. So this is also maybe one of the reasons why I would avoid this category as well, just because you don't get any of the benefits of these two categories. How about translating game models into a film-ready piece? Yeah, that might lean more into this one, which is a kind of a nice hybrid of both. But yeah, anime has some really cool designs. Like this is a very simple form, but if you can take this and make this look like a realistic vehicle, you've essentially done the concept side. So I think something like maybe, if you took the swordfish, right? It could essentially come over here. But it's an existing IP, it's something you like. Another thing, for example, is if you take an existing IP that people like, right? Like you take like an Ava and you make a realistic Ava, you do get the standout connection of the existing IP. But then you still get all the benefits of the problem solving. Yeah, no, this video kind of sounds like I'm trying to convince people to like anime. But for me, this is why I think anime is like it's kind of like a cheat of having a connection to the audience, plus not having to deal with the same issues of the film IP. How would you rank vehicle, motorcycle, tank, spaceships in terms of difficulty? From which should someone start? I think, honestly, all of those things can be as hard as you want to make them, right? You can make a tank not that detailed, or you can make a motorcycle not that detailed, or you can make a tank super complex and have all the like welding modeled in. This is kind of what I mean, right? It's not necessarily about what the project is. It's more about the quality of the project itself. The point of having maybe one real world and one concept is more just proving the skills of problem solving and copying one to one. So the subject itself doesn't really matter. You're just trying to show a variety of skills. That's all the portfolio is. The portfolio is just showing your skills. So if you can show you can build elegant forms, and then you show you can also problem solve, but deal with old, damaged, worn out forms, you've kind of ticked a lot of the boxes that I've needed. Also, what I would probably encourage is if you're going for a hard surface modeling, I kind of don't really think modeling alone is good enough anymore. I think you need to texture as well. I don't think the modeling portfolio is strong enough anymore. So I would highly encourage texturing as well. What I would also kind of mention is if you want to do hard surface, I wouldn't like diversify your folio for the sake of diversifying and adding something organic if your organic work is not as good as your hard surface. Because say you have like an amazing car, you have some really cool robot over here, and then you have some shitty organic snail that no one cares about, the snail is going to pull down your portfolio. You know what I mean? Like I would rather just have few pieces that are your best foot forward. When you say solve problems for concept, do you mean you need to model so it would function in real life? Yeah, exactly. So say, for example, you build, you learn about how like a car functions and stuff like this, right? You learn about how the suspension and all this stuff works, right? You can kind of take this logic and take it to a concept car. Like, for example, you have to figure out what is going on here, right? And this is kind of the benefit of learning from the real world first. You can take that knowledge and bring it here to these sorts of assets and try and apply a real world logic to make this function in the real world. Like I remember, so this was actually one of the things that Darcy did for our mentorship. And she was obviously researching real mechanisms for the wheels and stuff like that. So she copied the suspension of a real truck for the back. So that I think is why having one concept thing is good, because it forces you to essentially take what you've learned from the real world and apply it to something that doesn't exist. So the issue of only having concept work and having nothing from the real world is we don't know if you've just like faked something, right? Because you could have just made this stuff up yourself, and if you couldn't get the form correct, you just made it up and cut corners. Where, say for example, you go to a museum, you take photos of this, you line up the model on top of this, and you show you can match this one-to-one. You've proven to us you've matched this one-to-one. Where with concept, you could be like, close enough, job done. Is there a tolerance to how close you should match it one-to-one? I mean, I would match it one-to-one as much as you physically can. Like, for example, with concept, especially if it's like a 2D image like this, the chance of you matching this one-to-one is just not going to happen. Obviously, try and do it as close as you can. But yeah, I know this one here, this is the most divisive one. Realistically, I think at the end of the day, as long as it looks good, who cares? It doesn't really matter. If someone does an amazing Jaeger, I'm not going to turn them away just because they've done a Jaeger. If it's a good Jaeger, who cares? Like that's the thing at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, all that matters is the work good or not? And that's the only thing that should matter. Is the work good, and have they demonstrated skills to do the job? Is there anyone in your mentorship doing a real world piece? They're all doing concept. No, they're all doing concept. So in my mentorship, there's no reason for me to do a mentorship with someone doing a real world piece, because all it would be saying yes or no to they've matched it or not. Where this is where the creative problem solving, my eye for problem solving can come in and help them. Someone copying a motorbike there's no need to do a mentorship with me for this sort of thing, because it's just going to be me being like yes or no. Like you can probably throw this stuff into the Discord and get opinions. The benefit of this stuff in mentorship is you can have my thoughts for making this stuff function. You can cheat and choose unused concept art from your favorite IP. I mean, technically, yeah, sure. It's kind of the same as doing the anime thing. But yeah, at the end of the day, like people think you need like 20 portfolio pieces, and it's not true. All you need is like 2, I think. What do I consider the hardest one? They all have their own challenges. There's no harder or easier one. They just have different skills involved. For example, real world, you need to match everything pixel perfect. That, to me, is personally much more tedious than doing the concept problem solving part, because I find the concept problem solving part fun. But I couldn't have done this without doing the real world stuff first. Anime stuff looks hardest for me because you need to add so much details. Yeah, that can be true. But same, for example, this thing here. This also would require more detail to look functional and sell the scale in the real world. So you would still have to do the same thing. You would still have to do your own paneling because of the scale of this thing. Ben Ert also said 2 pieces enough. Yeah, it makes sense. I don't think you need like 10 pieces, right? I think the only issue, I mean, I've seen plenty of people get jobs with 1 piece, but I think the only thing with, if you have 1 portfolio piece, you're only doing this category or this one. But yeah, these have their own benefits and these have their own benefits. These 2 are the outliers. You can do these if you want, but I would definitely lean more towards these ones for sure. I'm of the mind doing IP models is great for personal projects and practice, but I wouldn't use it on a portfolio. Why not though? If the work is good, why not? This is kind of the thing. I think it's better at the end of the day, you have to really want to do your work. So if, say, for example, you really, 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 really like Jaegers, it would be better to do a Jaeger and make it an amazing portfolio piece than do some random concept that you're not really that interested in. At the end of the day, all that really matters is the quality of the work. So if doing this will give you a much better asset than this, I would rather the student does this one. But yeah, I just need to reiterate that, of course, this is just my opinion. There are people that disagree with it, especially when it comes to this category here. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think as long as the work looks good, that's all that really matters. I think because there are tons of artists doing IP models, it gets a bit boring to see over and over. Yeah, I do agree with that. It's kind of like it's kind of been a hit and miss, right? Because it is boring seeing the same assets over and over, but then at the same time, it's also like, oh, cool, they made that thing I like. Let's see how they did, how their attempt of it was. Where, say, for example, no one will know this aircraft from Collie. Where's his name gone? There he is. So that's why this thing can be more of a, it can be hit and miss, because everyone knows Chappie, but then everyone's probably sick of Chappie. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. If the work is good, the work is good, right?